Hey guys, welcome to the Wheel to Wheel podcast, our second episode here. And we want to talk about an interesting concept here with you guys today regarding stereotypes and barriers into the current world of motorsports. And so the first thing we wanted to talk about here is the perceived difficulty of a given motorsport. And this is something where, if you're watching it just on TV and you're never really a part of it in terms of driving the actual car or really being physically there in person, it's really hard to get a grasp of just watching on TV how difficult it really is to participate in a given series.
Yeah, I think a lot of people tell me, is motorsports even a sport? You're just sitting there and driving. So definitely the perceptions are there, and the stereotypes are there.
Yeah, and it's funny because along the way, motorsports has to obviously have a safety aspect to it. But I was always thinking, what more can we do on the presentation front whenever we're watching a race, for example, to make it seem more even to the casual racer that isn't a diehard fan. How do we make things more entertaining to them? How do we make things look more difficult on TV?
Well, I don't know if we need to make things look difficult. I think they are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think as any driver can say, and they have said that you interview these drivers after a race or before the race, it's a very physical sport. And I know that from our little bit of experience in karting and talking to some of the people in our club too, it's a hugely physical sport. After a race weekend, you are gassed. Like you have to be physically prepared for the weekend, train, and then execute. And then bruised ribs, sore back, dehydration. These are all real challenges. So I don't know if we need to make it look more difficult. I think maybe we just need to bring the reality. So I think having more behind the scenes and conversations, and having people to come out and experience motorsports, getting involved in motorsports, that'll help. Right,
absolutely. And with that as well, maybe also have, various, I know they're moving around, for example, camera positions, the new visor cam that was in Formula E. I think those are really cool perspectives.
It's very popular,
Yeah, and so I agree completely now with your point on that sense as well. So yeah, definitely a combination maybe of something like that to just give viewers different ideas, different perspectives on what the driver's doing.
Yeah, part of the television series, whenever you produce a racing is a show or anything, is that you're far away, you're not sitting in the car, and so the driver's eye really shows you the pace at which the driver has to respond and things are happening around him. And in most single-seater racing, or maybe even in some sports cars, visibility is relatively poor around you, so you really need to have a good awareness of your surrounding to drive it. And if you watch the faraway shots, they're driving inches or millimeters beside each other, and sometimes there's contact. And so I don't know if you can really appreciate how hard it is to drive that close without actually having done it at those speeds and those reflexes. So it's incredibly hard, in my opinion. So.
Right. And that actually brings me to the point where, these differences that we see in various motorsports, I think we should really have that appreciation sense. But, we unfortunately we don't. And that's where we come into, my motorsport is better than your motorsport because, they're perceived to be better in terms of, a hierarchical level. Pinnacle of motorsports, when you say that, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Formula One.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so it's a little unfortunate in that sense because, rallying, for example, I think by far, to be honest, if I were to look at Formula One and rallying, I would say rallying is 1,000 times harder.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it's a controlled tarmac setting for Formula One or Formula E, most road racing for that matter. But on a rally race, you're really relying on your co-pilot's notes and your recce notes and making sure that they're good. And hopefully, whoever went in front of you didn't change the setting enough by, knocking over some stone or something. And so it's really not a control setting. So it's very hard.
Exactly. And that's the thing, right? And so being motorsports fans ourselves, obviously, we really want people to also go ahead and embrace the diversity that we have. As we mentioned in our first episode, the uniqueness of motorsports is the wide spectrum that you really have, but you can really gain an appreciation of the different techniques that are used within various motorsports.
Yeah, I think motorsports fans have an understanding of how hard it is. Maybe it's the general public that have a real difficulty understanding. They see all the person is sitting in their racing cockpit and turn a steering wheel, but it's a lot harder than that. And I know for endurance racing, for a fact, like the amount of mental focus that it requires is out of this world. In fact, I even run into challenges in some sprint racing with mental focus. So that's just me, but it's not an easy sport.
That's absolutely for sure. And with that being said, then our second idea here, in terms of some of the stereotypes and barriers that we see in motorsports today, is definitely the cost aspect. Of course, we, as much as we don't want to really bring it up as a hindrance, it's obviously an inevitable factor in any motorsport. Is obviously cost. It's definitely a challenge, especially in today's world. Where dollar for dollar, you're looking for return more than ever.
Yep.
And obviously sponsors make a huge portion of that. We can't thank them enough. But also, there's that misconception again that more money goes into a particular sport, therefore making it more wealthier, therefore producing hopefully a better product at the end.
Yep.
And therefore, again, it being better than another category of motorsports.
100% agree. I think, people in the West here love NASCAR, and in Europe they love their Formula One and other DTM racing and all these car racing. But if you look at the range and cost, they're all expensive. They all range between each other, but I wouldn't discount one for the other. I think the world is changing as well with sim racing. That's allowing people to get closer and closer to experiencing what it is to drive at a high limit and what it takes. But it's still not the real deal. But I don't think one series is above the other. I think if you look back, there was an era where maybe Formula One was not that interesting, and even some could argue even today it's not that interesting as Mercedes runs away with the championship. Just because they're spending the most amount of money on the sport doesn't necessarily mean it's the best form of racing. I, for a fact, think that grassroots level karting is just as tight and close, and I think there's been a lot of Formula One drivers in the past who, on record, have said the same thing. That's real racing. So,
right, and that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of the series that we're seeing now, especially upcoming here for, let's say, even Formula One and NASCAR too, even they're trying to implement cost caps. I know it's failed in the past due to their current agreements, commercialized agreements as well. But they're really making a push for that, and I think that is a good thing for the sport in a sense, just because, again, it tries to level out the playing field. For example, when we go karting, our karts are generally basically the same. Competitor, obviously depending on the class, they're generally the same piece of machinery. So again, it really brings the driver talent to the forefront. Of course, you can make some changes, tires, getting fresher tires, or making different changes. But for the most part, motors around the same, and key components. That's why, again, we see such great racing, I think, in Formula E.
Agreed.
People, again, like to maybe laugh at it and discount it in the sense that, it's not Formula One, and they're not going that quick, and the street courses are pretty tight. But I think it's some great racing, and I think part of it is we don't know who can win on a given race weekend.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to we're not really speed fans, we're racing fans.
Exactly. I agree.
And I think there's a difference. I mean, when you're racing, the concept of racing is competition. You want to be faster than someone. But if you really have a superior machine, or the playing field is not even, it's not really that fun to watch it, or even to be part of it, really. Right.
And so that's, again, costs are definitely something that, many organizations, the FIA and other privatized organizations are working on, just to try and compete at a level that is, again, competitive, provides competitive entertainment racing as well, but at a managed cost, so that way, you don't have money necessarily buying your way in fully. It'll always be a part of it, unfortunately, where talent, sometimes gets kiboshed by a paid driver coming in. But this is something that, unfortunately does create the stereotypes then in terms of various motorsports. But we're hoping that, with our podcast, as we continue in future episodes, we hope to provide that insight in various motorsports. So you guys can really have a good understanding. And we want to hear back from you guys, in terms of what your thoughts are for any particular series, what you guys want to hear back from us as well. And and then we'll basically present that stuff to you as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time.
Take care.